Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. How's it going, Joe?
Doing good, doing good. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here again.
Great.
Yeah.
So this week we want to talk about a topic that has actually been coming up a lot. This is how do I convince my boss to hire a data engineer?
Yeah. And of course, this resonates with the entire theme of this discussion that we have every week. Another week, we were talking about why we need data engineers and not data scientists. So it's very much in the same vein.
Yep. Yeah, I know personally my inbox has been blowing up with questions about this. Friends calling me up asking, so maybe they're an analyst or a data scientist, and they have to figure out how to make data pipelines work, how to set up data warehousing, et cetera. And this is outside their skill set. At the same time, their boss has a lot of questions like, why do we need a data engineer? Why can't you
Yeah.
just do that? Or why can't we just get our software engineer to do this? So I think we're going to dive into these points and many more, and just sort of I think give some guidance in terms of if you're in a situation where you suddenly feel like you're in over your head with respect to data architecture, data engineering related matters, and you feel like maybe you need some assistance from a data engineer or need to hire one, this is definitely worth tuning into. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think one big idea that we'll loop back to here is that a lot of these people who are in effect doing data engineering work are capable of becoming data engineers, but they just don't want to. And you need to find someone who wants to be that specialist. And we're going to tell you why.
right. And so, and again, I think that the target audience for this is data scientists, data analysts, right? And again, you'll typically probably have a boss, and so that's who this is for. So I guess let's start from the top. I mean, do you need a data engineer at all? And if so, why?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the big problem, most companies that start to have success with analytics and any utilization of data science, et cetera, discover that they need automation. So they need data to start flowing from APIs in an automated fashion, and then downstream, they need to parse it, they need to transform it, they need to clean it. And what ends up happening is that people who are not specialized in this area have to do that work, be they software developers or data scientists. They get very annoyed with this task, and they also tend not to be very good at it, not because they don't have the talent to be good at it, but they have other things that they really care about a lot more. They'd rather be building models. They'd rather be working directly with the business and solving business problems. And the automation just becomes kind of a sideline, and they tend not to learn the technology with any depth. So they set up a lot of really simple cron jobs that tend to break a lot, and they don't do things in a data engineering way. It's kind of my take.
Yeah, and it's a chicken and egg problem,
Yeah.
because if you've hired analysts, this sort of presupposes that you have data for them to analyze.
Yeah.
Or if you've hired a data scientist, it kind of assumes that there's data for them to do the science part on.
Yeah.
But this isn't often the case. In fact,
Right.
it's the old cliche. Data scientists spend 80% of their time doing non-data sciencey stuff, which means like not doing machine learning, not doing statistics, but most of the time is actually spent acquiring, cleaning, processing data, transforming it, et cetera, et cetera. Work that is traditionally done by somebody in a data engineering capacity, right? And so, uh, and that also means you're not getting the full value from your data or your data scientist or your data analyst. So,
Yeah. Yeah, you need a specialist that is really good at this new type of job role. And it's a hard problem because the modern notion of a data engineer is really very, very new to my mind. I'd say, in 2015, we were hearing a lot about big data engineers, but that's quite a bit different than what we think of as data engineering now, which is a combination of some open source software skills, a lot of operational skills, and a lot of cloud skills. And the reality is that most data scientists and analysts don't have those skills and aren't super excited to get them either. They, like you said, they want to be doing data science instead.
right, yeah. I mean, you can't really be great at everything. There's too much to learn with all the things you just mentioned, cloud skills, um, you know, all the other technical skills you need to do
Yeah.
data engineering. I mean, this is somebody's full time job. So, And I think a lot of this question depends. Like, do you need a data engineer? A lot of it depends on the type of company you're at.
Yeah.
Um, so, a company that's starting out, kind of greenfield, we'd actually recommend skipping the analyst hire or the data science
Yep.
hire for now and actually investing in data engineering because this is going to lay the foundation upon which you can hire analysts, hire data scientists who can then hit the ground running. If you don't have a solid data foundation in place, these data scientists and analysts are just going to be there spinning their wheels. They're not going to be as productive as they could be if they had the data, in a good spot to work with. And what does being in a good spot mean? It means the data is available, it's of good quality, and it's arriving with a frequency that's appropriate for analytics and data scientists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also there's a certain directionality to these skills. And by that, I mean that typically data engineers can do some basic analytics. They can put together basic reporting. If you ask them to put together some business metrics and automate them, they can do that. Whereas the skills don't tend to go in the other direction. In other words, if I have a really competent data scientist, they usually can't build out the automation that I need for data engineering unless they choose to move into specializing in that and say, now I want to be a data engineer. I'm going to do the work to become a good data engineer.
And we've seen some data,
Yeah,
data scientists make that leap, and they've done a really
absolutely.
good
Lots of them
job.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a matter
So,
of commitment and just putting in the time to really develop that skill.
mhm.
Yeah.
And I think if you work at a more mature company,
Yeah.
a lot of these problems have been solved, so to speak. But again, we even see more mature companies building out maybe a data science team before a data engineering team.
Yep.
Again, it's the order of operations sort of gets muddled. I think as the company's grown, just because you start developing different departments and maybe they build out each department's build out its own separate data team maybe or some who the hell knows actually.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, part of it is a problem of visibility, right? I
yeah.
mean, inevitably, in a small company or a large company, the data scientists tend to be the cool kids. I mean, we're using cool in a very loose way here, but they're the ones that the executives are looking to for answers. And so the executives will show up at the desks of data scientists and say, hey, I don't understand this thing, or here's a major problem I have. That rarely happens with data engineers. They tend to work kind of behind the scenes. And therefore, it's harder to justify those hires, even though they're desperately needed. You need an organization that's mature enough to understand that there are all these backstage processes that have to happen in order for the show to go on. It's not just the actors out front. That's more like the data scientists.
Right. Yeah. And in fact, I think we can make a pretty good argument that if you aren't hearing a lot from your data engineering team, that's probably a good thing. It's sort of like
Right.
the Maytag man back in
Yeah.
the day, where um, you know, I don't know that you'd want like um, fireworks going off with your data engineering team all the time. That
Yeah.
would be a red flag that stuff's breaking. But when things are working, and I think the data scientists are able to, uh, you know, answer questions and provide a lot of value to the business, that would indicate that the data engineering team is also doing its job.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, you can probably the best approach here is to interview the data scientists about their data engineering needs and say, are you getting the data you need? Is it automated? How much how much low level coding work are you having to do to make sure that the data flows correctly? And if they're not having to spend time on those tasks, that means that your data engineers are really doing their jobs well.
So, let's take it back to the data scientist who realizes that they're probably in over their head when it comes to data pipelines and setting up the infrastructure. Maybe this data scientist was just hired at this company because they felt like, oh, we'll get a data scientist, and magic will happen. And now this data scientist need to start building out maybe a data warehouse, data pipelines, maybe down the road machine learning infrastructure and so forth. Um, I guess if you're talking to your boss about this, your boss is probably going to ask, well, okay, so what's the difference between what you do as a data scientist and what a data engineer does? So how does a data engineer differ from a data scientist?
Yeah. And I think the answer is this unique combination of skills. It's about being able to operate in the cloud and create systems. So not just models, but actual systems that will deliver the data in an automated fashion for models. And it's funny, I feel like there's a lot more general domain knowledge amongst business leaders about what software developers do relative to data engineering. And so maybe part of what we need to do is communicate more about what data engineering really is.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's definitely a valid point. It's I think there's still a lot of confusion about what data engineering is, even amongst data engineers. It's kind of funny. So,
Yeah.
my simple definition of data engineering is that your primary responsibility is to um, acquire and process raw data ingredients and make those available for consumption by data analysts, data scientists, machine learning engineers, and so forth. But you're basically on the front lines of acquiring, the data that can be used, in other applications. And so, I don't know if you have a same or different definition of data engineering.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that definition. And I would also say that for organizations that have embraced the cloud, data engineers really act as the glue between all the components they're going to have in the cloud. They bridge basically all these different cloud systems and APIs and data sources and provide the bridge to go to the data scientists, basically, and the analysts. So glue together all these pieces, build out data pipelines, automate, and then the data scientists and analysts should just be able to consume the data at the end of the pipeline.
So that's not a data scientist then.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the bridge, right? It's not the person actually doing the building the models, it's the person feeding the models.
Mm-hmm. And then what about a software engineer? Why can't I just take a software engineer and that person could just do data engineering stuff?
I guess my take on that is that generally data engineers need a lot more domain knowledge about different types of analytics databases, potentially other big data systems like Spark, and they need a lot more cloud training. Now, that's not to say that a competent software engineer can't become a data engineer, but it will involve a transition. They're going to have to learn a whole new set of operational skills, database skills, um, automation skills, orchestration, and such to move into that profession and be really good at it.
Yeah, I think it's just a whole new universe of knowledge um, to grasp. There's the whole
Right.
data lifecycle, knowing the best ways to ingest data, store it, process it, all the technology options available to for each part of the data lifecycle.
Yeah,
It's just a different beast than application development.
absolutely.
It would be like asking your data scientist to become maybe a front end engineer, for example, right?
Right.
And now you have to go learn React or Vue and understand everything about that architecture. So I would also say, if your boss has some confusion about software engineering versus data engineering, that might be a good way to think about this too. If you as a data scientist were suddenly asked, okay, well, I need to now become a front end engineer or a back end engineer, how would you feel about that? And do you think you could do it? I mean, I'm sure you
Yeah.
could. You're smart, but I mean, you've been hired to do one job, and now you're being asked to do something else. And so, and again, all these are all different disciplines.
Yep.
If they were the same thing, then I don't think we'd be having this discussion. You would already be doing data engineering.
Yeah. Well, following on with what you were just saying, there's already, in most cases, a pretty significant gap between front end engineer and back end engineer. Just that transition can be pretty daunting in terms of the skills you have to have and the tools that you need to know. And data engineering is an entirely separate and adjacent discipline with a pretty dramatic difference in skills. And also, I think of it as a difference in level of abstraction. Modern data engineers tend to work at a higher level across many systems in the cloud, as opposed to working on one component of a code base and being a specialist in that, which is pretty typical for software engineers.
Yeah, that's entirely right. I mean, even if you zoom into say Google Cloud, right,
Mm-hmm.
and the number of things you need to know to be a competent data engineer in Google
Right.
Cloud, it's actually pretty mind-boggling. You have to know dozens of different technologies, maybe not at an atomic level, but
Yeah.
I would say at a very deep level of understanding from a functional standpoint.
Yeah.
Whether you talk about stuff like data flow, big table, BigQuery, all your ML options that you have. How does cloud storage work?
Security.
right? Security,
Security is a big one.
right? Really important.
Yeah.
Data privacy, all these things.
Yeah.
You have to keep in mind. And if you came into this from a software engineering background or a data science background, that's just that's a lot to know. So
Yeah, exactly. And again, if you want to make the transition, if you think that you'll enjoy data engineering, it's certainly something you can explore. Probably shoot us a LinkedIn message and we can give you at least some directional guidance. But yeah, don't shoehorn people into roles that they're really going to hate, because usually people become data scientists because they really want to be in that profession. And so forcing them into
yeah,
something else is just going to lead to a lot of unhappiness and probably bad engineering
I
too.
mean that's I mean that's how we met. I mean you were a recovering data scientist and I was one, and then we met and gave birth to this company and so. But a lot of what Ternary does, I think, is it's directly informed by our experiences of seeing this firsthand, being hired as data scientists and basically having to do everything except the data science part, just out of necessity to
Yeah.
build the foundation. And so, I would say, when you're talking to your boss, I would just be pretty clear. Like, look, there's certain aspects of a data science role that I'd be most effective in,
Yeah.
but we also need to get this other piece in place, and working in tandem for us to be 100% working. So
Yeah. And if you really want to sell it, I would make two cases here. I'd first of all argue that you're paying me a good chunk of money to be a data scientist. And I can be far more effective at my job if I'm supported by a data engineer. And second, that data engineer will also support a lot of other activities in the company. And so they'll have a broader effect beyond just that data scientist. For example, automated reporting and things. There are a lot of things that a data engineer can do with quite a bit of fluency that are going to be a real struggle for a data scientist.
yeah, and I mean your company's already made an investment in you, but to maximize that investment, it's you're gonna need the infrastructure.
Yeah.
You're gonna need the data. I can't tell you how many times we've seen data scientists and data analysts basically working at well below their capacity or just being idle, frankly, because they don't have the right data in place. And so, and then it's just a frustrating situation for everybody. It's frustrating for the employer because they're paying for somebody and they're probably not getting the best value out of it. It's frustrating for the data scientist because, like, you as a data scientist, like, you want to do a great job.
Yeah.
Nobody's. I would say very few people are hired who want to do a substandard job. I mean, everybody, I think, when properly motivated, wants to put forth the best effort, and but if you don't have the support or the resources, it's going to be really hard to do that, no matter how motivated you are to want to do your best. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think most data scientists have run into this frustration where they just don't have the infrastructure. That 80% of time they're doing things like downloading data onto their laptops and then importing it into pandas in various ways and trying to build models on very limited infrastructure. And data scientists can really help you to solve a lot of those problems and basically allow that data, or data engineers can solve a lot of those problems and allow that data scientist to really scale up their capabilities and
mm-hmm.
have an impact across the company. Yeah.
So I think some options too. When you're trying to convince your boss to hire a data engineer. I mean, there's a few options. I mean, you can get a fractional data engineer, so that might be a consultant. That person could, help with various tasks, implementing pipelines, other infrastructure pieces. They could coach you how to do it. So I think there's a lot of data engineering consulting firms that are popping up now to help fill this need. I think you should also try and figure out how much can you automate, right? So with data pipelines, I mean, moving data from point A to B and B to C and so forth, like that's, I think, becoming more and more of a solved problem. We always talk about this. So there's a lot of services out there that you can buy, SaaS products where in a few minutes you can have a data pipeline stood up. And I think some pushback on those from people is that, oh, those are really expensive. Well, okay, so like if it accomplishes a lot of what you need and you don't have to pay somebody, and it saves you time and provides better opportunity cost and more options for you. I don't know why you wouldn't make that investment. And so
Yeah, it's funny, but I think there's a real tendency to think of employees as a sunk cost. And it's like, well, but you're taking 50% of a really expensive person to do this job, then that's like basically 50% of their salary you're spending on that part of the job. And that's time that they could be using for something else productive besides just building very simple API connectors and such that can be purchased.
yep. And I think your third option too, if it comes to it, look for a full-time data engineer.
Yeah.
I think in other videos we talked about just the challenges of the job market right now in terms of hiring data engineers, but and that's why we mentioned the kind of the build versus buy, whether you're going to like build or buy skills in automation or just finding a consultant to help out. But if you feel like you need a full-time data engineer, that's another option too.
Yep.
So
Yeah, exactly. And you can even, I mean, we talked about how talented people in the tech industry can become data engineers even if they're not already data engineers, if they're dedicated, right? It's not like you have to go find someone who's fully formed, but you do need to find someone who's dedicated to the training and the skill development that they'll need. And so that can be an internal hire where someone moves from a data science or software development role, commits to becoming a data engineer and develops that skill set, or it could even be a junior person, an outside hire who's proven that they have talent and motivation and drive, but just hasn't developed the skills yet. Hire them at the bottom of the ladder and then let them develop under someone else's tutelage, maybe.
yeah, and I'm guessing the market dynamics right now might be changing a bit, where
Yeah,
maybe that is a good approach for companies.
yeah,
If you have somebody internally who wants to become a data engineer, backfilling that position with a data scientist, for example,
yeah,
is going to be, I think, easier because there's a lot of data scientists out there now. I don't think there's nearly as many data engineers,
yeah,
even though data engineering is by a lot of accounts more in demand right now than data science. So I think you're just gonna have a harder time finding data engineering talent. Any of the good talent is probably employed or they got their own thing going, and so you're gonna have to make a pretty convincing offer to somebody to have them, join your company. But maybe building the talent internally could be an option. Just backfilling those easier to get positions. So
yeah. Yeah, there's such a shortage right now, and especially when we're talking about cloud-oriented data engineers, there are lots and lots of AWS certified people out there, but it's still not enough, right? The demand seems to way outstrip the supply,
oh no.
and so yeah,
What AWS? I think what they're going to invest. I can't remember what article it was.
yeah,
But they're going to invest. Basically, the gist of it is AWS is investing a lot of money to get people certified in the cloud,
yep,
right? Over the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Yeah, because there's just not enough people with I would say solid cloud skills. So
right,
again, any of those people out there, they got work, right? And so it kind of cracks me up when I talk to execs, hiring managers, and like, oh yeah, I'm going to build a team of like 5 to 10 data engineers or more. And I'm like, yeah, you and like everybody else wants to do the same thing.
yeah,
And here's the deal: the pool of talent, it's very finite. So unless you're going to get really really aggressive, you're going to have to get really really creative.
yeah, exactly. And so yeah, find internal people that want to move in this direction, support their educational ambitions, give them the time to work on these certifications, to really pursue training in things that are going to be valuable in the job. You're not going to see a return immediately, but at least within 6 months to a year, they're going to be able to start contributing in major ways.
So here's a question too: what
Yeah.
happens if your boss says no to everything?
Ooh, I don't have a good answer for that one. You must have something in mind.
I don't actually. I don't.
Okay.
But I know this is going to come up.
It happens all the time, right? We've
Yeah.
seen it again and again.
Like, oh wait, well, yeah, you're on your own.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
And I guess at that point, you as a data scientist or analyst really need to make a determination of, is this something you can do? Are you able to single-handedly build out, everything that you need that a data engineer could have helped you with?
yeah,
It's going to be a lot of work, but the effort might be worth it. So you got to look at it from the perspective that, are you going to gain some cool skills that maybe you could
yeah,
use at a more supportive job down the line? Maybe. These types of skills are in demand, but it's also a question of, does this even interest you at all, right?
Yeah.
If it's not in your wheelhouse, it isn't in your wheelhouse. There's no sense in pretending that this is something you're going to be awesome at. If you're not motivated, you aren't motivated, and you're not going to be great at something if you're not motivated to do it.
Well, and you as a data scientist are trying to develop your career for the future. You're trying to learn the latest technologies, maybe make contributions to open source projects. And it's probably not going to happen if you have a second job as a data engineer. And so, yeah, you're going to have to make some decisions about where you want to go in the future. But there's a lot of wheel spinning we see with teams just struggling without those data engineering resources, and a lot of hacky code written to try to accommodate that problem.
Really hacky.
Yeah.
And what we end up seeing too is that those data scientists, they'll stick around, they'll give it an honest go.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, the data scientist who isn't getting the support, that person ends up leaving probably in a good 3, 6, generously maybe 12 months, probably sooner, much sooner. Just because there's a lot, if you're an experienced data scientist or relatively experienced, you're going to find work. And so, again, it's for the hiring managers out there, if you're going to invest in data, take it seriously. I think our advice is, if you're not going to take it seriously, don't invest in it. And I know that seems kind of obvious and easy for us to say, but unless you're going to, I think, take the time and put forth the resources to support your data team, it might be best not to do it at all.
Yeah, because often a badly run data science team becomes just a huge cost sink and doesn't return a lot of value. Data science teams get expensive very, very quickly.
They do. And if they aren't producing any value, then that money could be used elsewhere.
Yeah,
so,
unquestionably. The other thing I'd say is that really interview your data scientists and see if anyone wants to do data engineering, or at least wants to experiment with it, right? We've personally known many, many people who have made the transition and been extremely successful in doing so. A lot of data scientists find they really enjoy data engineering work once they have the right resources and training. It's way, way more frustrating if you're doing it just as a sideline and doing it badly. Once you start focusing on it, getting good at it, and doing it well, then it's much more fulfilling.
Much more fulfilling, for sure.
Like any job, right? If you half-ass it, it's not very enjoyable usually.
Yeah, and life's too short to half-ass stuff, right?
Yeah.
So and again, you're in a hot field, hopefully this advice is actionable. Again, I think it's an interesting situation because it is chicken and egg. I think in our view, if you've been hired as a data scientist or data analyst and there's not the infrastructure or the data in place for you to effectively do your job, I actually think that you may have been hired prematurely, and that the order of operations was exactly backwards. Hire somebody to build the infrastructure, to get the data in good shape, and then get the data scientist and data analyst in. And don't expect that data scientist and data analyst is going to be the person to build that infrastructure for you, because that's not what they're supposed to do, and probably not the training.
No. And again, they could get the training, but a lot of people don't want to. Understandably, that's not the job they signed up for.
Yep. Yeah,
so they end up just doing it begrudgingly. It's not a pretty picture. So.
Cool. Well, all right. I think that about wraps it up. So, again, to the audience, hopefully this was valuable to you, and hopefully you can convince your boss to hire a data engineer, or at least get you the support you need. So we understand.
Or talk to us. We'll try to convince them. Maybe provide some guidance on training too.
Sure. Send them this video, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So cool. All right. Until then, we'll talk to you next week. So.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care.